Carol Burnett, the woman who once captivated the entire United States with her warm smile and effortlessly charming sense of humor, has long been regarded as the kindest lady in Hollywood. Yet, after decades of maintaining a gentle and gracious public image, she suddenly left audiences stunned. Now in her 90s, during a rare interview with Rolling Stone, Carol Burnett openly brought up the men she once hated most in her life. What shocked people even more was the fact that they were not strangers at all, but the very individuals who had held the most significant roles in both her personal life and her career. One of them betrayed her through an affair and then attempted to claim their shared assets. Another used his power to bar her from the prestigious SNL stage for more than half a century. And yet another, a much younger man, dared to turn her likeness into a joke in a scene considered sensitive, forcing Burnett to take the matter to court. So in the end, which men were responsible for leaving such bitterness in the heart of this American television icon? And among them, who was truly the one she could never bring herself to forgive? 1. Joe Hamilton, the ex-husband who cheated and even demanded control of all shared assets. Few people realize that behind the dazzling glory of The Carol Burnett Show, a program that left an indelible mark on American television history, was a marriage that fractured little by little between two people who once stood together at the peak of success: Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton. They had once been hailed as CBS's golden couple, a duo who brought laughter to millions. Yet within that seemingly perfect world, those very laughs slowly turned into painful, chilling silences. The story traces back to 1960, when Burnett was still a young actress on The Gary Moore Show, while Joe Hamilton was already a seasoned producer who had worked on The Steve Allen Show and The Colgate Comedy Hour. Nearly 10 years older than Burnett, Hamilton carried the calm, polished, and worldly demeanor of a man who had seen much. They met during a taping at the CBS headquarters in New York. Burnett later wrote in her memoir that he looked at her in a way that made her feel truly valued. 3 years later, they held a small wedding ceremony in California, with only close friends and a few colleagues from the industry. By 1967, when The Carol Burnett Show officially premiered, Hamilton became the person directing the entire team behind the scenes. He was not only the producer, but also her advisor, her partner in life, and the one who helped Burnett develop ideas for every segment. For many years, they seemed like the perfect duo. Burnett supplied the emotion while Hamilton shaped the structure. But sometimes success grows so large that it quietly tips the balance of a marriage. According to longtime costume designer Bob Mackie, around 1975, Hamilton began asserting stronger control over the creative process. He insisted on reviewing and approving both the guest list and the script content before Burnett saw them. During one production meeting, Hamilton suggested removing segments that carried too much emotion so the show could focus on straightforward laughs. Burnett immediately disagreed, believing that audiences need warmth as much as humor. That argument became only the first of many conflicts that would follow. As work became increasingly stressful, Hamilton also started spending less time at home. At first, Burnett believed he was expanding partnerships with television collaborators, but soon rumors spread. The August 1979 issue of TV Guide published a brief but pointed note referring to a veteran producer entangled in a private relationship inside an editing room in Los Angeles. No names were mentioned, yet everyone in the industry understood exactly who it implied. Several crew members said that during that period, Hamilton was often seen with a young CBS editor. The two were frequently spotted together at the Smokehouse, a well-known restaurant near the studio. Burnett did not react immediately, but according to her close friend and co-star Vicki Lawrence, Burnett broke down in tears after overhearing a few crew members discussing Hamilton's overly intimate behavior with the young woman. The breaking point arrived in 1982. While reviewing financial paperwork, Burnett's lawyer discovered that Hamilton had secretly established a separate company, Hamilton Productions, based in Beverly Hills, and had quietly registered copyrights for 2 television projects derived from their show. One of them was Mama's Family, a spin-off of one of Burnett's most popular sketches. Yet her name was nowhere to be found in the contractual credits. It was the final straw. Burnett confronted her husband directly. Their conversation, as recounted in the biography Laughing Till It Hurts, took place right in their shared CBS television city office. She asked him, "Do you think it's fair to turn what we created together into something that belongs only to you?" Hamilton answered coldly, "This is business, Carol, not emotion." That single line extinguished any last chance of reconciliation. On March 3, 1983, Burnett officially filed for divorce in the Los Angeles County Court. The Los Angeles Times mentioned it in the Hollywood Notes section with a simple headline, "Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton separate." But behind that short announcement was one of the most complicated asset division battles in American television at the time. Hamilton demanded full control of all production rights, including profits from The Carol Burnett Show and its related projects. Burnett countered by insisting on a 50-50 split and the right to keep the brand name. The trial lasted nearly a year. Reporters from People Variety and USA Today waited outside the courthouse daily. A source close to the proceedings revealed that Burnett remained composed throughout, while Hamilton appeared visibly exhausted and tense. Throughout most of the hearings, they barely looked at each other. In June 1984, the judge issued the final ruling. Burnett retained the rights to the show's name, while Hamilton received 40% of the syndication profits. When asked how she felt after the verdict, Burnett gave a weary smile and said, "We used to be the best team until the day he forgot that I wasn't just a partner." That remark appeared on the cover of People and was quoted repeatedly across television talk shows. After the divorce, Burnett withdrew from all projects under Hamilton's control. He went on to produce a few smaller programs, but none as successful as before. In 1991, Hamilton passed away from heart disease in Los Angeles. Burnett did not attend the funeral. She sent a white floral arrangement with a handwritten note. "I wish you peace, Joe. As for me, I will keep going." A short message that carried everything left unsaid. Years later, during a conversation at the Paley Center for Media, Burnett softly reflected, "Joe taught me that in this business, love alone is never enough. Trust is what truly matters." 2. Harvey Korman, the on-set blow-up that forced Burnett to fire him. Beneath the glittering lights of American television in the 1970s, an era when every burst of laughter translated into ratings and lucrative advertising deals, the Carol Burnett Show stood as an unrivaled empire. At the very center of that triumph were two performers who seemed almost destined to work side by side: Carol Burnett and Harvey Korman. Burnett was the heart of the show, while Korman was the vital spark that made audiences laugh every weekend. Yet behind the smooth sketches, behind the perfectly timed applause and the warm glow of studio lights, an unseen storm was slowly forming, one strong enough to shatter a friendship that had lasted nearly 10 years. In 1974, as the show entered its 7th season, everything appeared to be at its peak. Ratings dominated the time slot. CBS extended the contract for 3 more years, and the team had just collected their 4th Emmy. But it was exactly at that moment that the first thin cracks began to appear between Burnett and Korman, cracks only visible to those who worked closest with them. Bob Mackie, the show's longtime costume designer, recalled that during that period Korman was irritable, quick to anger, and even avoided Carol backstage. Some whispered that he felt pressured by his solo nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy and feared being overshadowed by a female colleague adored throughout Hollywood. Everything erupted one April afternoon inside Studio 33 at Television City in Los Angeles. During a rehearsal for an episode featuring guest star Petula Clark, who had just flown in from London, the backstage lighting malfunctioned, leaving Korman's face lost in shadow. Without hesitation, he stopped acting, threw his script onto the floor, and shouted, "After all these years, you still can't get this right." The room fell silent. Director Dave Powers tried to calm him, but Korman continued, even turning to complain that not even Carol seems to care. For Burnett, who led her show with kindness and respect, that line cut straight to the bone. Burnett had been watching from the empty audience seats. She rose, walked directly to the stage, and without raising her voice or showing anger, she looked at him and said clearly and slowly, "Harvey, I've had all I can take. If you can't respect the people here, you don't need to be here anymore." The studio froze. According to Bob Mackey's account, and even more laughs, the sound of a microphone hitting the floor could be heard. Korman stared at Burnett for a few seconds, then turned and walked out. No one dared to follow him. Later that afternoon, a cameraman recalled seeing Burnett remain alone on the soundstage for more than half an hour. She gazed at Korman's empty chair before quietly telling the director, "I didn't want it to end like this, but he pushed it too far." Just a few hours later, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner reported Harvey Korman walked off the Carol Burnett show during rehearsal. CBS refused to comment, but the story spread rapidly. Some reporters from Variety even suggested that Burnett had finally run out of patience after months of tension with Korman. During the next 3 days, Hollywood buzzed endlessly. Close friends of Burnett, including Vicki Lawrence, tried contacting Korman, but he remained silent. Burnett continued arriving at the studio as scheduled, saying nothing about him. A technical crew member recalled, "She was calm, strangely calm, but everyone could see the exhaustion in her eyes." On Wednesday morning, the phone in the CBS office rang. It was Harvey Korman. He told the assistant, "I need to talk to Carol." When Burnett picked up, his voice shook slightly. "I was wrong. I want to come back." The next day, Korman appeared at the morning production meeting. The entire room went quiet when he entered. He apologized to the full staff, then turned to Burnett. "I forgot why I started doing this in the first place." Burnett smiled, walked over, and embraced him. The studio applauded. but those who were present knew the fracture could not be undone. Corman stayed with the show until 1977, then departed quietly. Burnett remained in touch, though the friendship had undeniably changed. In a 1983 interview with Entertainment Tonight, when asked about Corman, Burnett simply said, "Harvey made me laugh more than anyone, and he also gave me the biggest headaches." The incident later became known among television writers as the Studio 33 blow-up, one of CBS's most infamous behind-the-scenes conflicts. It also became a classic example of how fragile relationships can be between two stars at the top of their careers, deeply connected yet easily wounded by professional pride. And after the storm passed, Burnett emerged stronger, more disciplined, and far more cautious in her relationships. She no longer allowed emotion to interfere with work. But the turmoil in Carol Burnett's life didn't end there, and what came next would leave her even more heartbroken. 3. Marlon Brando, the Shameless. 3 a.m. advance that infuriated Burnett. The third person to appear on this list was none other than Marlon Brando. Hollywood is filled with stories that at first sound like baseless rumors, yet the deeper one digs, the more real they become, sometimes even more unbelievable than anything a screenwriter could invent. And one of the strangest stories of all is the unbelievable incident between Carol Burnett, the queen of CBS television, and Marlon Brando, the world-famous star who had just shaken global cinema with The Godfather in 1972. It happened on a summer night in July 1972. Los Angeles was wrapped in silence with only scattered lights glowing along the Coldwater Canyon hillside where Burnett lived in a warm wooden home with her 2 young daughters. When the clock struck 3:00 a.m., the telephone suddenly rang. The housekeeper, thinking something urgent had happened at CBS, quickly woke Burnett. Still half asleep, she picked up the phone only to fully awaken a moment later when she heard a deep, slow male voice on the other end. "Carol, it's me, Marlon Brando." At first, she thought it was a prank, but when the man mentioned the rerun of the Carol Burnett show that he had just finished watching on CBS, Burnett immediately realized it really was Brando. In a later conversation with journalist Dick Cavett, Burnett recalled that Brando told her he admired the way you make audiences believe in your characters and that he never expected television to carry such emotional depth. Burnett simply smiled, thanked him, and assumed the call was about to end, but it went on for more than 30 minutes. Brando began talking more freely from filmmaking to Hollywood to his belief that television doesn't have enough women like you. The longer he spoke, the lower and slower his voice became, slipping in a few jokes. That to Burnett crossed beyond the bounds of courtesy. In her recollection, she said, "I realized I wasn't speaking to any of Brando's roles. I was talking to the real man. He was charming, intelligent, but also very dangerous." As Brando continued extending the conversation with increasingly suggestive compliments, Burnett politely cut in, still gentle but firm. "Mr. Brando, I truly appreciate what you're saying, but it's very late. I have an early taping tomorrow." With that, she hung up, convinced that the matter was over. But only hours later, Hollywood erupted. By midday, The Hollywood Reporter had already published a headline, "Marlon Brando stays up all night, calling Carol Burnett." 2 days later, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner followed with a provocative title, "Brando seeking inspiration from CBS's Queen of Comedy." Famous columnists like Luella Parsons and Rona Barrett added even more detail. The call lasted more than an hour, and Brando spoke with Burnett as if he were flirting, over the phone. The rumor spread so quickly that CBS had to release an official statement confirming that the call was purely personal and unrelated to work. Burnett, furious, demanded that the network's PR team intervene to stop the gossip, but it was too late. An anonymous insider even claimed that Brando called again a few days later, but Burnett refused to answer. Burnett's close friend, actress Vicki Lawrence, recounted in a 1991 interview that Burnett had been both embarrassed and angry. She feared her private life would be twisted, feared audiences would misunderstand her. During a lunch at Musso and Frank Grill, Burnett told her friend in frustration he crossed the line. "I cannot believe Marlon Brando thinks calling a woman at 3:00 a.m. is normal." From that night onward, Burnett never saw Brando again. At public events, she made sure to avoid sharing the same camera frame with him. At the 1974 American Film Institute Awards, when Brando unexpectedly appeared on the red carpet, Burnett immediately turned in another direction. Reporters assumed it was coincidence, but people in the industry knew it was intentional. From then on, in every monthly schedule prepared by Burnett's PR team, there was a small added note: "Do not attend events where Brando is present." This detail was never publicly revealed, but a former CBS employee later confirmed in the book Hollywood Inside Out that Burnett avoided every place where he might appear. Brando never publicly addressed the incident, but those close to him said he once half-joked, "Carol takes things too seriously. I was just talking." The remark did nothing to ease the controversy. In fact, it fueled it. Many people began citing it as proof of Brando's ingrained arrogance and his tendency to believe he could cross any boundary he wished. For Burnett, the incident was not only a personal shock, but also a painful lesson about boundaries and trust in the entertainment world. After that night, she became far more cautious in her interactions with male colleagues. Someone who worked with her during the show's 8th season said Burnett never answered the phone after midnight again, even if it was an emergency call from CBS. Yet, the harshest blow was still ahead. What wounded her most deeply later on was not another private phone call, but a moment of public humiliation in front of hundreds of guests in the heart of Hollywood. But for Lorne Michaels, the man Burnett accused of belittling women and deliberately keeping her off SNL. In the world of American television, there is a story that has been repeated for decades, like an unresolved mystery for nearly half a century. Carol Burnett, the trailblazing woman who paved the way for female-led comedy programs, was never once invited to host Saturday Night Live. Given her stature, the facts seemed so unbelievable that many people in the industry referred to it as a deliberate silence. To understand the roots of this one has to go back to 1975, the year SNL first aired from Studio 8H inside the Rockefeller Plaza building in New York. At that time, The Carol Burnett Show on CBS had entered its 8th season and remained the most watched program in the country. Burnett represented a warm, humanistic comedic spirit, while Lorne Michaels, the creator of SNL, was shaping a new style that stood in complete contrast, political, sharp, satirical, and at times cuttingly harsh. From the earliest episodes, several critics, including Harriet Van Horn of the New York Post, wrote that Burnett should appear on SNL to bridge the gap between two generations of comedy. That seemingly harmless suggestion became the starting point of a nearly 50-year silence. Inside NBC sources said that Burnett was once mentioned as a potential guest for Season 2 around 1976, but Lorne Michaels personally crossed her name out, explaining that she doesn't fit the spirit of the show. In the book Live from New York Back Bay in 2002, an SNL editor revealed that Michaels had said in a meeting, "She belongs to old television. We're creating something new." These stories only became widely known when journalist Tom Shales published an article in the Washington Post in 1981, stating that Burnett had expressed interest in appearing multiple times but received no response from NBC. The article caused an immediate uproar. Hundreds of letters flooded the network questioning why America's top female comedian was being ignored. A week later, NBC issued a statement saying that guest invitations depend on the tone and content of each season. But few believed that explanation. Burnett herself had never publicly asked to be invited, but many in the industry said she clearly felt overlooked. During a Larry King Live interview in the late 1980s, when asked directly about the issue, Burnett smiled softly before giving a half-joking, half-bitter response that made the audience laugh while still feeling the sting in her voice. "Maybe I'm not lethal enough for them." Those who worked with Michaels said he had a very firm vision for the SNL brand. He wanted the show to be youthful, rebellious, sharply sarcastic, and provocatively edgy, entirely different from Burnett's warm and genuine comedic style. A former editor speaking anonymously to Rolling Stone in 1990 shared that Michaels had bluntly rejected a major sponsor's request to have Burnett appear in the 10th anniversary episode. "We respect her, but that's not our kind of comedy." That comment, though never officially recorded, was widely believed to be the clearest confirmation of an attitude that had lingered behind the scenes for decades. As the years passed, the relationship between the two remained cold. In 1993, at the Television Academy Honors in Los Angeles, Burnett and Michaels were listed among the speakers for the event. Those in attendance, including New York Times reporter Bill Carter, later recalled that when Burnett took the stage, the entire room rose for a standing ovation. But just minutes later, when the host introduced Lorne Michaels, Burnett stayed seated, offering only a faint smile while looking directly into the camera. That moment was later replayed on Entertainment Tonight, where viewers called it the coldest stare Hollywood had ever seen. The story might have faded away until 2023 when NBC produced a special Carol Burnett 90 Years of Laughter plus Love to honor her. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Burnett was asked whether she regretted never being invited to host SNL. She smiled kindly, but her answer shook the entire media world. "I guess they didn't need me, and I didn't need them either." With a single sentence, she closed the door on nearly 50 years of silence. On social media, the hashtag Dashi invited Carol to SNL spread rapidly within 24 hours. Thousands of fans rallied in support, urging NBC to correct history. Later, when asked again during a panel at the Paley Center for Media, Burnett simply said, "Some people don't realize that kindness has its own kind of strength." From that point on, Burnett rarely appeared on modern variety programs. She deliberately stepped back, preserving her classic image. But eventually, fate placed her in another collaboration with a man she had once deeply admired. And that seemingly promising partnership quickly transformed into one of the most painful professional disappointments of her entire career. 5. Cary Grant, the man who openly disparaged Burnett's lowbrow comedy style. Hollywood in 1968 was a world drenched in dazzling lights, overwhelmed by extravagant parties and the enormous egos of its stars. In that atmosphere, the Carol Burnett Show had just risen to phenomenon status, winning big at the Emmys and propelling Carol Burnett's name to the forefront of American television. That same year, Cary Grant, the epitome of elegance from Hollywood's golden age, was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Two legends, two generations, two paths that should have crossed only long enough for a polite handshake. Yet that night at the Beverly Hilton, a single careless remark created a rift between the two icons that would never truly heal. The gala took place in the International Ballroom, a space filled with Hollywood's brightest figures: Lucille Ball, Gregory Peck, Elizabeth Taylor, Jack Lemmon. Carol Burnett arrived radiant in a deep red gown designed especially for her by Bob Mackie, walking with confidence. When the ceremony ended, she lifted her glass of champagne and approached Cary Grant's table, the man who had just received the honorary trophy. Roger Ebert, the renowned film critic who was present later, recalled that the moment Burnett drew near, the mood at the table shifted noticeably. A director sitting beside Grant, seemingly trying to ease the awkwardness, spoke up. "Have you seen Carol's show? The whole country's obsessed with it." Grant slightly curled his lips, his voice low and edged with unmistakable sarcasm. "That show, the kind of comedy where you flail your arms, make faces exaggerate every emotion. I honestly don't understand why people enjoy that." The words dropped into the ballroom like a pebble into a still lake. A few people let out uneasy laughs while others froze. Burnett kept her smile, but her eyes changed. Without reacting dramatically, she simply answered softly, just loud enough for Grant to hear. Maybe audiences prefer laughing with real people instead of perfect characters. Silence blanketed the entire table. Burnett nodded politely, then walked away, leaving Grant with an uncomfortable smile. But Hollywood never forgets moments like that. 2 days later, the Los Angeles Times published a brief item in its entertainment brief section: Cary Grant and Carol Burnett, a cold encounter at the Beverly Hilton. Though the wording was mild, the article implied that Grant had looked down on Burnett's mainstream comedic style. The news spread quickly throughout Hollywood. Some insiders defended Grant, insisting he was just joking. But television audiences, especially women, were furious. At CBS, the network behind the Carol Burnett Show, the communications department, responded immediately. They issued a short statement affirming Carol Burnett represents a form of humor that is humane and intelligent humor grounded in empathy, not silliness. Although Cary Grant's name was not mentioned, everyone understood the message was aimed at him. Burnett stayed silent, but Grant unintentionally intensified the situation. In a private interview with Variety reporter Art Silverman, when asked about American TV comedy, Grant replied, "I prefer more sophisticated humor, something closer to European style. Television now is too loud. Everyone is trying too hard to be funny." He didn't name Burnett, but all of Hollywood knew who he meant. Tabloids soon embellished the story, spreading rumors that Grant had once told Carol directly that she was cheapening the elegance of comedy. Even without evidence, the gossip spread widely, doubling the number of letters sent to CBS in November 1968, most of them expressing support for Burnett. Burnett's response only deepened the public's respect. She didn't retaliate, didn't grant interviews, and simply kept working. That year, the Carol Burnett Show achieved its highest ratings ever. Burnett even invited her close friend Lucille Ball, another comedy legend, to appear in a special episode. Lucille later shared that Burnett had told her, "The best answer is to let them turn on the TV and still see us there." Still, Burnett never forgot that evening. In 1970, Paramount Pictures invited her to co-star with Cary Grant in a musical film. Burnett declined, citing scheduling conflicts, but someone from the production team later revealed that she privately said, "I won't work with someone who belittles women's laughter." As for Grant, he never apologized publicly or revisited the incident. Yet in Graham McCann's biography, Cary Grant, A Class Apart, the author noted that Grant once admitted, "Carol is so smart and strong that she made me feel uneasy." Ironically, Grant's disdain became a source of motivation for Burnett. She continued bringing everyday people to television screens: homemakers, seamstresses, maids, ordinary individuals full of heart. Over the next 3 years, Burnett won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards, and The Carol Burnett Show was named one of the classic American television programs by TV Guide. From that moment, Burnett understood something essential. Sometimes there is no need to respond with words, success speaks loudest. Yet, ironically, the more successful she became, the more she seemed to unsettle the powerful men of Hollywood. 6. Dick Van Dyke, the man who once criticized The Carol Burnett Show for being bland and too feminine. The year 1977 had barely begun when The Carol Burnett Show stepped into a turbulent period of transition. Harvey Korman, Burnett's longtime partner on screen and the soul behind countless sketches, suddenly left the show after 10 wildly successful seasons. CBS was forced to search for a major name to fill that enormous gap. And to them, only one star carried enough weight to take on the role: Dick Van Dyke, the beloved icon who had charmed American audiences in Mary Poppins and The Dick Van Dyke Show. Hollywood immediately buzzed with excitement. On August 15, 1977, the Los Angeles Times ran a hopeful headline: a dream collaboration, 2 American TV legends to share the same stage. CBS launched an aggressive promotional campaign plastering posters across Los Angeles featuring Van Dyke and Burnett smiling brightly. Yet that cheerful optimism vanished within weeks, giving way to backstage disagreements that viewers would never see. From the very first rehearsal at CBS Television City, the differences between the 2 stars became unmistakable. Van Dyke was accustomed to the Broadway style, slower pacing delivered lines marked with theatrical emphasis. Burnett, who grew up in the world of live television, demanded quick timing, spontaneity, and rapid-fire exchanges. Writer Bob Ellison recalled in his book, Television Tales, on day 1, Dick asked to rewrite lines because he felt they didn't match his rhythm. Carol just smiled, but I could sense the tension rising immediately. 2 weeks later, during the first run-through with a test audience, Van Dyke abruptly stopped mid-performance, held up the script, and said directly to the director, "I think this bit is too soft, just girly lines with no real comedic punch." The entire studio froze. Burnett, standing only a few steps away, looked at him briefly and quietly slipped backstage. Ellison later said no one dared say a word. Everyone could see Carol was truly hurt. She wasn't angry, she was sad. Rumors of the collision spread quickly. A TV Guide reporter wrote an article titled "Tension Brewing on the Burnett Set," quoting an anonymous source who described the pairing as a dream team that turned into a clash between 2 comedy generations. CBS tried its best to suppress the gossip, but inside the industry, it was obvious the 2 had stopped speaking outside of work. By mid-October 1977, the conflict reached its breaking point. During another rehearsal, this time with Lucille Balbaret's close friend in attendance, Van Dyke stopped yet again, sighed, and commented, "I just can't get people to laugh at this feather-like comedy." Lucille Ball later told People magazine that Burnett turned to her, offered a tight-lipped smile, and whispered, "I think I chose the wrong person." The following week, Van Dyke failed to show up for a scheduled taping without giving any explanation. CBS had to rework the entire script, and Burnett reshot the main scenes with her original team. The network released a short statement: "Dick Van Dyke is leaving the show due to personal scheduling reasons." But according to Bob Mackey, the show's legendary costume designer, the truth was entirely different. He said Van Dyke had privately told the writing staff, "I can't work in a place where everything is driven by emotions." Later that year, during a press conference in New York, Van Dyke told a Chicago Tribune reporter, "I admire Carol, but our styles differ. I prefer comedy built on structure, while her show feels too light." The remark seemed harmless, but once reprinted in Variety, it was interpreted as a direct insult. Burnett's fans were furious, sending hundreds of protest letters to CBS. Burnett, however, remained composed. In an interview with the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, she simply smiled and said, "I've always believed laughter has no gender. It's only divided into what's honest and what isn't." Her brief, calm answer made it clear she had no intention of reopening the matter. Van Dyke stayed on for only 6 episodes before stepping away. That season of The Carol Burnett Show ended more quietly than any before it. And when CBS produced the Carol Burnett 10th anniversary special in 1980, Van Dyke's name was noticeably absent from the guest list. Even though viewers had once anticipated his appearance, the television world regarded it as Burnett's subtle way of stating that the wound from those days had never fully healed. But even then, the tumult surrounding her career was far from over. 2 decades later, a bold, controversial young creator, Seth MacFarlane, the mastermind behind Family Guy, would once again force Carol Burnett into a courtroom to defend her dignity. 7. Seth MacFarlane, the man who brazenly used Burnett's image to mock her in a sensitive scene. In 2007, Hollywood entered a period in which the boundary between satire and insult became more fragile than ever. Shows like South Park and Family Guy, dominated American television with a style of comedy that spared nothing and no one. Within that landscape, Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, was praised as a genius at breaking boundaries. Yet, the most publicized boundary-breaking moment of his career targeted one of the most respected icons in all of America, Carol Burnett. Everything began far more quietly than most people assumed. On April 23, 2006, an episode titled Peterika aired on Fox. Inside that episode was a very brief scene, no dialogue, no background music, yet it was enough to shock millions of viewers. On screen, a minor character appeared wearing a blue maid's uniform, a headscarf, and holding a mop. An image almost identical to Charwoman, the classic character Burnett had portrayed more than 200 times on The Carol Burnett Show. But in Family Guy, Charwoman no longer symbolized hard work and kindness. She was placed into a suggestive, disrespectful context. Instead, that very night, Fox's feedback line was flooded with hundreds of angry calls. The next morning, Variety and The Hollywood Reporter simultaneously ran stories condemning the scene as a misguided attempt at parody. Older audiences, especially those who had grown up watching Burnett on CBS, considered it a stain on the memory of American television. During the same time in Santa Monica, Burnett, then 73 years old, received a phone call from her former manager Joe Hamilton Jr., informing her of the situation. According to assistant Jill Saperstein in People magazine, Burnett listened in silence for a long moment before softly saying, "Charwoman is not a joke. She is a piece of the audience's soul." No one expected that less than a year later, this incident would escalate into one of Hollywood's most talked about lawsuits. On April 16, 2007, Burnett officially filed suit against Seth MacFarlane in 20th Century Fox Television in the Federal Court of Los Angeles. The complaint, more than 20 pages long and signed by attorney Richard Bush, who had once represented Johnny Cash, accused Fox of infringing on a copyrighted persona and damaging an artist's reputation. Burnett requested $2 million in damages, a modest figure by Hollywood standards, but one carrying significant symbolic weight. The press quickly labeled the case a clash between two eras of American comedy. CNN covered it on the evening news, while the Los Angeles Times launched a full commentary column asking, "Can the freedom to satirize override collective memory?" Some critics, such as Ken Tucker of Entertainment Weekly, sided with Burnett. This isn't just about Carol. This is the line between art and disrespect. Younger viewers, especially fans of Family Guy, defended MacFarlane, arguing that comedy is absolute freedom. The first hearing took place on June 14, 2007 at the United States District Court for the Central District of California, presided over by Judge Dean D. Prager. Burnett did not appear in person, but submitted a video statement recorded at her home. In the video, her voice is calm yet slightly raspy. She said, "I am not suing for money. I simply want to remind people that some characters belong to the hearts of the audience, not to anyone else." Fox responded aggressively. MacFarlane's legal team argued that the scene was clearly a parody protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. MacFarlane appeared in court with a composed attitude. In an interview afterward with the New York Times, he explained, "I grew up watching her show. I thought she would understand that every iconic figure can inspire the next generation." That seemingly harmless remark further ignited public debate. USA Today published an editorial titled, "Even Laughter Needs Limits," asserting that MacFarlane confused admiration with appropriation. The Los Angeles Times ended one commentary with a pointed line, "There are memories, even those stored in archives, that must be treated with gratitude." On July 3 of 2007, Judge Person dismissed the lawsuit, ruling that the scene fell under fair use for parody. Although the case concluded, the controversy did not fade. Burnett did not appeal. In a brief interview with NBC, she said simply, "I have said everything I needed to say in the way I felt was right." Public sentiment, however, leaned heavily in her favor. In a year-end survey by Entertainment Weekly, 68% of respondents stated that Burnett did the right thing. A veteran critic from Variety wrote, "She did not win in court, but she won in the hearts of the audience." As for MacFarlane, he maintained his usual stance. In 2019, during the 20-year anniversary celebration of Family Guy, a reporter asked whether he regretted anything from the controversy. He replied, "I have never regretted a single episode." The remark once again brought the old incident back into conversation among Burnett's supporters. But the moment Hollywood remembers most occurred 4 years later during CBS's 70th anniversary celebration in 2011 at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles. Burnett and MacFarlane happened to be seated in the same row as guests. When the television camera panned across them, Burnett sat upright, wearing a calm, gentle smile. Behind her, McFarland leaned forward slightly in a polite nod. She did not respond. She simply clapped her hands quietly to the music. If the journey through Carol Burnett's life and the hidden corners behind her legendary smile has left you feeling surprised, feel free to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. In your opinion, who was truly the person who hurt her the most? And don't forget to hit the subscribe button along with the notification bell, because behind the bright lights of Hollywood lie countless untold backstage stories, secrets bound to glory as well as silent, lingering pain. See you again in the next episode.